Hi everyone, it's Max, and today I am here with my September wrap-up. So it is a little bit more low-key. I'm not wearing any makeup. The lighting's really bad. That's because it's 11 at night. With everything that's going on, my dad had surgery recently, so he's not leaving the house as much, and we have Airbnb guests, and my room doesn't have walls or a door. It's really hard for me to film. So this is when I can do it. Let's just get on with it. So in September, I participated in 4 readathons. I participated in Becca's Bookoplathon, Alice's Adventures Through Wonderland readathon, Buzzwordathon, and Tolkienalong. So the way that I'm going to go through these are just reading off where in the order that I rolled for Becca's Bookoplathon, and I will mention if they were in a different readathon as well. My first roll was dark cover, read a book with a dark cover, and I went with Arusha and the End of Time by Roshni Chokshi. This was a readathon for me. It was for Alice's Adventures Through Wonderland to have a cozy night in, read a book in a cozy setting. And I really enjoyed this, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. And this is about a girl named Arusha who is a liar, and she's caught by her classmates, and she says that this lamp is cursed, so they force her to rub it, and a demon comes out that stops time, and she has to save the world. Next prompt was read a book with a POC main character, and for that I went with Arusha and the Song of Death, which I ended up giving a 4.25 out of 5 stars. The next prompt was read the first book in a series, and I went with my Tamora Pierce book for the month, First Test. This is the first book in the Lady Knight Quartet. This is about the first Lady Knight since Alana, but Alana disguised herself as a boy until she became a knight, where in this she is known to be a girl from the start. I did really end up enjoying this. I forgot for a minute that it was middle grade, and so I was worried that it was going to be like really intense, like the sexism and everything, but it was actually very toned down because it is middle grade. And I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. And this went towards Alice's Adventures Through Wonderland readathon, down the rabbit hole to read a book set in a different world. The next prompt was Standalone, and I read The Night Tiger by Yangtze Chu for the Buzzwordathon readathon, where the word was night. This is about a girl and a boy whose paths intertwine through this man's thumb, where the boy is trying to find the thumb to bury with the man while the girl has the thumb. She finds it, and I ended up really enjoying this. The title doesn't really work with it because these night tigers are only referenced. They're not actually really part of the plot, but I did really like it overall, and I gave it a 4.25 out of 5 stars. The next prompt was read a sad book, and I went with my Alison Weir book for the month, Lancaster and York, and this kind of tells the entire story of the War of the Roses, which went on for many years. And it was sad, you know, it went through many kings who died, and it was a lot of bloodshed and a lot of death. So the themes were sad, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. This was for chance, and I put in just a bunch of titles with numbers, and I did a random number generator, and what came up was A Midsummer's Night's Dream by William Shakespeare, also for the Buzzwordathon. I didn't like it. Hot take. I always knew that I liked his dramas more than his comedies, but this just did not work for me. I didn't find it funny. I found it very boring. It's about these characters who are in love with people, but then they're kind of cursed when they're asleep, and they woke up in love with other people, and it's supposed to be just like, you know, wacky and hijinks, but it was just boring, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. For community shelf card, I put in read a book with an LGBTQ plus main character, and I pulled it, and I went with The Lost Book of White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. This is a series that takes place in between the Mortal Instruments books, following Alec and Magnus. And I enjoyed this. It's definitely not my favorite by her, but I'm pretty sure I give it a 3.75, 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, the next prompt was read a book with a light cover, and I went with The Bone Shard's Daughter by Andrea Stewart. And this pleasantly surprised me. I really went into this expecting it to be pretty stereotypical, average, but it was actually really fun. This is a world where magic is outlawed except for the king and queen and ruling party, where they actually have bone magic, where they use bones to create other creatures. And it was really interesting. We follow 5 characters. The princess of the kingdom, a pirate, he smuggles children out into other places, a lord's daughter, maybe it was just 4. It's been a while now. But then someone who can't remember anything, she just like has this job. She's starting to feel like she's becoming a human. It's interesting. I really liked it. It kept me on my toes. It definitely like made you think it was gonna go this way. And I was like, yeah, okay, it's gonna be a pretty average plot twist, but whatever. But then it was like, oh, nope, actually, haha, here's the real plot twist, which I always like. And I did really enjoy it, and I'm really excited for the second book. And I gave it a 4.25 out of 5 stars. The next prompt is to read an adult novel, and I went with The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have a whole reading, watching, reviewing vlog up of this where I read the book and watched all 3 movies over the last 3 days of September. It was a lot of fun though, and really enjoyed the book, and I really enjoyed the movies, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next prompt was to read a sequel, and I went with the last book in the Ace of Shades series, Queen of Volts. And this was kind of disappointing. I felt like the first 2 books could have been a duology, and this would have been an interesting standalone following different characters but in the same city. Because this series is about a girl named N who comes into this city trying to find her mom, and she gets involved with all these gangs, and there's a gang war going on, and stuff happens. And I really liked the first 2, but this one just didn't work. I think part of it is that I can barely remember King of Fools, and I couldn't find a synopsis of it or like a full summary of it. And this just fell super flat. I found it pretty boring. The book ends basically right where it began. Like nothing really felt like it changed. Character development went downhill for everyone except Levi, and I just didn't like who the main bad guy ended up being, and I just don't think it worked. And I think I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, maybe even lower, because honestly it was pretty unremarkable. The next prompt was read a 5-star prediction, and this one was also quite the bummer, and that was Down Comes the Night by Allison Shaft. This was about a girl who was a healer, and what I thought was that she was sent to help this person like heal, and they get snowed in, and it turns out that this person is like their enemy in this war. But it wasn't. It was like she was invited by this man to come heal his employee, who ended up being this secret bad guy, or like working for the other side. But I thought it was gonna be this angsty hate to love romance, but it was really just like immediately she's convinced that like her country's had it wrong all along, that they're not actually the bad guys. The actual bad guy was this other person, and it just didn't work for me. I thought it was very it just didn't hit the mark. I thought it was boring. I thought the romance happened way too fast, and the plot itself was pretty unremarkable, and it felt just so classic and stereotypical, and it just did not work for me. And I ended up giving it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. All right, and then for the last of my original roles, it was have a friend recommend you a book, and I texted my best friend like a picture of my NetGalley shelf, and the first book that she said I ended up DNFing, so she said another one, which was The House at the Bottom of the Lake, and I loved this book. It was so scary. It was short. It's like a novella, and it was so good. It's about this couple who on their first date find this hidden lake and a house at the bottom of it, and they decide to explore it, and they become obsessed with it, and it's haunted, and they start to kind of feel like they're going crazy. I thought it was so good. I read this in a hotel room in Salt Lake, and it was just scared me so much, but in like such a good way, and I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. All right, and then in my Buzzwordathon reading vlog, I did another set of roles to try to encompass books that I had read this month but didn't fit into my original Bookoplathon roles. So the next one was to read a book that was a TBR vet, and I went with Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare. This is just Shakespeare has been on my TBR forever. At all of his books, it's like kind of a lifetime goal of mine to read all of them, and this again had night in the title, so it worked for Buzzwordathon. It also disappointed me. This is about a girl who is in a shipwreck and is presumed dead, but she pretends to be a boy and like gets work at this like lord's house or something. I thought it was super boring. Again, she's barely in the book. It just really didn't do anything for me, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next prompt was again to read a book with a light cover, and I went with Train to Impossible Places by P.G. Bell. There's a lot of white and yellow and just lighter colors. It's not really a dark cover, and I really like this. I read this for Adventures Through Wonderland readathon, and it was one to read the group book because it's the group book, and it was also to, I think, read a book that you think you'll love, which was Queen of Hearts' Palace. And I did end up really enjoying this. I gave it a 4.25 out of 5 stars, and it definitely reminded me of Alice in Wonderland meets Polar Express because of the train, but it also has that nonsensical type of feel to it as Alice in Wonderland has, where it's just like you just all of a sudden are swept on this adventure, no rhyme or reason, and you get to do all this awesome stuff. And there's a villain, but like it was just so much fun, and I really, really enjoyed it. This is about a girl who wakes up in the middle of the night to I think they were trolls building a railroad through her house for the Postal Express to go through. And she hops on board, she becomes an employee of this Postal Express. She goes on a lot of adventures, and I really enjoyed it. The next prompt was to read a standalone again, and I went with Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I also read this for Buzzwordathon because there's night twice on the back. I'm counting it, and I ended up enjoying this. It kind of missed the mark with the horror aspect. This is about a girl whose family receives a disturbing letter from her cousin, and she is sent to her cousin and her new husband's estate to kind of figure out what's going on. And it was supposed to be like kind of a haunted house story, but I didn't really feel that. It felt very like, yes, you're wondering what's going on, but then like kind of the answer was a little lackluster for me and just really weird. But I liked our characters, I liked the setting, I did really like the writing. It was just that missed the mark for me, but I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And then the next prompt was to read a book with fire on the cover, and I went with A Torch Against the Night by Sabatier. There's fire. This was a reread for me. I'm gonna reread A Torch Against the Night and A Reaper at the Gates before the 4th and final book in this series. This is a series about a girl named Laia who becomes a spy/slave and goes into this very prestigious war academy and meets Elias, who is the bastard son of like the commander, and they work together to overthrow the empire. It's so good. This reread really reminded me of how amazing this series is. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm so excited to finish the series. For the next prompt, it was to read a small book, and I'm going with Alice in Wonderland. This version's huge because it has like all of his books, but Alice in Wonderland itself is very short. And I read this for the Alice in Wonderland readathon, or the Flower Garden Read an Aesthetically Pleasing book. Even though I listened to it on audiobook, all the covers that I have of this book, which are 3, I really love. I think they're very pretty. Alice in Wonderland is about this girl named Alice who falls down a rabbit hole and goes on many adventures. Everyone knows it. The next prompt was to read a book with LGBTQ plus themes, and I went with Mythopedia, and this was an ARC that I got, and it was beautiful. It is short snippets of different myths from around the world with amazing artwork. And myths, I find, and legends in a lot of cultures are very gender fluid. You know, no god is actually like male or female, they just are. And so that's why I went with LGBTQ+. And then the last prompt and last book that I read this month was for Read a Light Cover again, and I went with Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There by Lewis Carroll. This is a light cover. This is the only version I have of Through the Looking Glass, but it's light pink with the whites. And this is the sequel to Alice in Wonderland. I read it again for the readathon. It was Eat Me, Drink Me, Start a Book with a Snack. And so I started listening to the audiobook and I ate a bar. So I also gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. All right, everyone, I'm so sorry for this kind of mishmashed, very low-key video. I just needed to get one out because I should be editing and uploading it tomorrow. But I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye.